This is the April 10th, 2008 meeting of the Shade Tree Commission of the City of Athens. The meeting will come to order. Our first order of business is our issues of tree permits and right-of-way. And we have one item listed on the agenda, 152 Morris Avenue, which I've not heard back yet from Ron Lucas, but this is something that has rather a long history. And Ann had looked at this tree. The ODNR, Ohio Department of Natural Resources Regional Forester, who advises us, and this was about a year ago, and you'd found a tree in poor health.
It is. It's in decline. It's probably not going to improve.
Yeah, and so this might be a candidate for removal and replacement, do you think?
I think we put it on the removal list, but then I think it got kind of pushed off because there were so many other trees. And then Ron said he thought he might be able to kind of prune it back just to buy us some time. So I don't know where that's at.
Yes, I don't think that has happened. So,
okay, and the homeowner called again?
Yes.
Yeah,
so perhaps this is time to move it up the list.
Yeah.
Is it
Just have to be patient.
Is it a safety problem?
Probably not,
Okay.
but it's in the trees. It's going. I mean, and it'll get to the point where it's won't. I don't think it'd be safe to climb.
Right, okay.
So
Yeah, okay. Well, okay. We'll, if other people want to look at the tree, but with Ann's opinion like that and the history, perhaps we should just move.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have something that came in just yesterday, and I only picked this up. I don't think everybody has a copy of this. People will share, please.
I've seen it.
Okay, yeah. On Elahu, you might know a little bit more about it than we do. This is an application, rather it is a plan to do something with a revocable license before the revocable license expires at WG Grinders, 120 West Union, and there is a restaurant, cafe there, Grinders, and they have a plan here that they would like to put 8 tables out in front of their building. There's a very deep sidewalk there, and they're using 10 feet immediately in front of their building where there's a sidewalk, and then there's another 18 and a half feet to the curb and the street. So this is a space that is a very deep sidewalk. And was there any discussion at City Council, Oahu?
Well, this was a renewal of a revocable license for them to be able to use the public right-of-way for the sidewalk for their tables. That was the original drawing, actually, and the reason it was forwarded to the Shade Tree Commission was they had plans, and you can see on the plan here, for several planters. And as far as where, I don't know if you know Steve Pearson, they haven't had those planters out, and we were just wondering if maybe we might be able to give them a little nudge to to get some planters out there with some kind of appropriate.
This is not trees, this is
Yeah,
for planters. And it's for something that originally was to indicate the border area of an eating space, as was required by the State Liquor Control Commission. I think, am I correct in this description?
There were some original plans for outdoor dining and drinking, and I think the plans changed whenever council didn't look favorably on the drinking aspect of it. The nature of a revocable license is it can be revoked at any time. So a violation would be, for example, if they said they were going to put in a planter, you could just revoke the license if they didn't.
Okay, well, then they need those planters out there.
I think we should make a strong recommendation to council that they require the planters.
That license, I think, originally, I could say it was a little more involved, and so that was like the most grandiose plan that they had for development out there, but it just never did happen that way.
about 10 years ago, they actually wanted to plant trees out there. Do you all, any of
I
you
do remember
that?
Robin Todd Hunter worked on that and tried to get a grant to pay for the work at the edge of the sidewalk.
Yeah, at one point the state agreed to cut cutouts even, but then it was, it just never, they were going to pay for the trees and the city was going to, cut the sidewalk. They have a diamond saw or whatever. Too bad, because it's a great planting site.
Yes,
It would be, yeah.
it would be a Yeah, this is,
A
would be
lot
something.
lower
worth-
maintenance than planters.
Yes, I have to say, as probably one person in town who knows a lot about planters on the sidewalk, they will have an interesting time maintaining those and keeping odd objects out of them.
What about if they put shrubs? You think that would be a good recommendation? Shrubs that would sort of fill it, be discouraging to people using them as ashtrays and things, and it could be sort of attractive.
In
They
the
would need-
planter you're talking about?
Right, putting shrubs in the planters.
Do you know how large the planters would be?
No, I don't think there was a specification.
No, they look to be about, see, there are tables out front that seat 4, and the planters look to be about half the size of a table for 4.
So 3 foot across, I would have said, just guessing at what that, like, I mean, a decent size.
It's a pretty good size.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, they would be very well advised to do something like an upright shrub with some kind of an architectural profile, and maybe limit the business of putting flowers in there, I'm sorry to say.
I was wondering about Conica white spruce, which is a dwarf form Christmas tree shape.
Yeah, okay, that's a good suggestion. Conical white spruce.
Conica,
Oh, excuse me.
Conica.
Ignorance is always so
Oh,
apparent.
what about also boxwood, like what you have in front of your
Green
trellis?
Mountain boxwood might be a possibility.
And what is that? It's a pyramidal shape, right? I mean, it's, it's sort
Well,
of a
the name of it is Green Mountain,
Green Mountain.
and that depends partly on how you prune it. A boxwood is going to have to be sheared, or it's going to
Right.
grow too much and then fall apart. The white spruce,
won't need a lot of maintenance.
yeah, white spruce would not take that sort of maintenance.
Okay, well, let us then suggest that they put out the planters, since they need to do that.
Delineate the space, and then use some vertical delineation as well with the other shrubs.
And we might say something about the size, because I've seen some of those for sale or in small planters about so big, and I think we're thinking of something bigger than, say, 18 inches.
2 to 3 feet.
2 to 3 feet.
The planter size will be whatever's on sale at Lowe's.
No. I'm sure they'll come up with something nice.
It will need to be a fairly large planter, or the roots are going to freeze and the tree will die during the winter.
Yeah.
Or they'll be too light and they'll blow over. So the bigger the planter, the better, just for their.
Yes, or the planter will get up and walk away.
Right. It's another virtue of large.
And they could even plant a few annuals around the edge of
Yeah.
the planter
Yeah,
if
okay.
they would like.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be the easiest investment. So, could, Emily, could we get you to list those shrubs and email me? We can.
Yes.
And then we'll just give them that recommendation of something specific
Might be
to choose
might
from.
be easier for them to move if they've got some directed guidance.
When is council due to act on it?
It was actually already approved.
It's okay. It's not-
And it is revocable, so
Okay.
so we could still put pressure if we needed to.
Okay.
And it wasn't a huge issue with anybody.
No.
I mean, they keep the area pretty nice and clean down there. And it's,
No, I
it's not a
just wondered
problem
if you were waiting on us to.
No, there's not a
Okay.
timeline from our end.
Does this, Steve?
I would mention too, this is a new business owner, so they're not familiar with anything that happened 10 years ago.
okay.
Whole new set of people.
Yeah, within the last year or year and a half, they're new owners.
Okay. That's important to know.
Yes, it is. Yeah, we don't want to discourage, but we do want to help them do the right thing and do something that won't cost them repeated investment.
Right.
So is the possibility of actually planting in the sidewalk itself?
I would question whether you'd want to do it that close to the building.
No,
I think if they were going to be interested in shade trees, they should be planted closer to the road.
Near the
Yeah.
curb?
Yeah, near the curb.
And there's a problem with shade
Well, there's 18
trees
feet
if
to
they
the-
don't
okay.
get a good big space to plant them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the 4-foot square places that we have on Court Street are pretty small
Pretty
for
tight.
good growth of trees.
Yeah, they call them tree coffins.
Yeah, in the new landscape ordinance, it talks about at least 8 feet across for these things, if you can do it.
I don't know, I'd take what I could get on that site.
Oh, yeah.
Just to get some trees.
Yeah, but in terms of sort of warning you, if you put a 3 to 4 foot hole in the ground, it probably isn't going to be enough. 5 foot square might be enough to keep them there. And that's typical sort of size of the sort of cutouts that you can do in those sidewalks.
Yeah.
I would mention too that if there's ever consideration for saw cutting the concrete and planting a tree, that you have to do a oops locate to make sure that you're not into anything, and especially water and sewer lines. So Nick Carr or either supervisors of water and sewer could, locate utilities that might be there. And you know how hard it is sometimes to get things in a certain amount of space. Just look at the tree right over here at the courthouse. There's very little dirt there because, not too far down, it's just completely concrete. So there's no telling what is under the sidewalk out there.
So it sounds like that's not a good option.
Not immediately, not unless they're really interested in doing it, then it could be investigated.
Oh, okay, will this do the trick? I think. Okay. We'll get something on paper to give them so that they have some guidance and make that recommendation. There is also in your stack of goodies, let's see, a letter, let's see, here's one for Emily. Oops, sorry. Maybe John could have one to look at.
I have 2 copies here.
Okay. Thank you. This was something I just got
I've already read one.
today too, and it is a communication, let's see, Mayor Paul initiated this communication with American Electric Power about the current cycle that they are doing on largely the west side, it looks, and then some on Stimson Avenue and
Cornwall.
Carpenter, West Union. There are almost 20 streets here where AEP is having its contractor, Asplund, do prunings and removals, and they're indicated by blazes on about a foot up the tree. You'll see either they've gone from red to pink blazes this time for removals, and blue continues to be the pruning blaze. And so if you see trees with those freshly painted dots, those are trees that are scheduled for prunings in the case of blue, or removals in the case of pink. And Paul is trying to get this coordinated so that the information is out there to make sure that people really do know what's going on. AEP is attempting to contact property owners, and there's also going to be hang tags, door hangers, put on people's doors by Asplund if personal contact hasn't been made. So this is something people should know about, and if people have concerns about a blaze on a tree that's near them, there is a number that can be contacted at American Electric Power, the Stephen Standley, the utility forester, and I'm going to read that number if somebody's really fast out there and taking notes. He has, the number is 740-594-1960. That's AEP's utility forester, Steve Standley, 740-594-1960. And there's a cell number of 740-591-0522, and that's again 591-0522. Maybe I should read the list of streets, just, we've got it here. They're Clark Street, North Schaefer Street, First Street, West Washington Street, South Schaefer Street, West State Street, North Congress Street, Kurtz Street, West Union and Union Street, North Lancaster, West and East Carpenter Street, North Court Street, Fern, Stimson, and Cornwell. So those are the streets that are on the current maintenance of vegetation around the lines, as they describe it.
I have one question about that. I'm wondering if there's any better way to contact owners where there's student rental property, and whether just a hang tag will get to the owner.
That's true. Yeah, I don't know how they're doing that, but that's a good question. Yes.
It would be nice if they send a letter to the property owner directly, but I'm pretty sure that's not how they do it. Maybe it's. I had a couple questions about this too, because on my property a year and a half, 2 years ago, they removed a couple of trees that were probably 30 years old, and they just cut them to the ground. And I'm wondering if, when they actually have trees for removal, is that something that they contact the Shade Tree Commission for, or is it something that we could strongly urge them to do in the future? Would we be able to
They
handle?
have the right under a city ordinance of 1986 to remove trees without asking anyone's consent.
And when does that expire?
Unfortunately.
That expires in 2011, and hopefully you will be on council and you will remember this.
But I'm hoping perhaps we can do something sooner.
We've tried.
David spent a lot of time working on
Yeah.
this.
So was Paul Will as well. When he was on council, as the Shade Tree Commission member, he worked with us, with Steve Stanley and others, to try and get them. And I think this letter is partly a response to that work that we did with them.
Yeah.
But we need to do what Cincinnati and other cities have done, and that is when that ordinance comes up for renewal, put in a requirement that they have to consult with the city over the removal and pruning of trees in the right of way. It still means that they can go onto someone's property when they've got an easement on that private property and
Sure.
do what they want. But for the city right of way, we could have some level of control.
And you can even charge them too for putting their poles on city property.
Well,
I mean,
that-
some towns have, just put it out there.
If you're a private property owner, that's what you do.
I think another option would just be to educate people that the pink blazes are for removal and the blue are for pruning, and if they have any concerns, they can call.
Yeah.
RIP.
Well, I'll certainly
We have that on
make
our
sure
website.
that Nina get a copy of this letter, because we've got one or two streets in there.
And when I had this trouble before, I contacted you guys, and there was a neighborhood association in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who had the same type of issues with asplund pruning for AEP, and they got an agreement where they actually have letters sent out from AEP. I've got a copy of one here. They're sent to their property 5 weeks before they begin work, giving them the option to do the pruning themselves, and they also have a plan when they come to do the work of what they're going to cut.
Wow.
And there's a little box on here that says left removal agreement. So if a tree needs to be removed, the homeowner has to sign off on that. So I'm not sure exactly if I can do anything with this, but I'd be happy to talk to.
We don't
to
think
any
we
of you
we can
guys.
revise the ordinance that exists, but we can change it once it comes up for renewal.
In 2011.
It would be
Save that.
very
Only 3
good.
years away.
Save those and be sure that whoever is on the committee to revise the ordinance has them when the time comes.
Yeah, in fact,
That's very
if you
good.
can let me have a copy, I have a file
Sure, I'll make a
for
copy.
all this. If we're not here, we'll hand it to somebody who can do it.
The actual practice, my impression is, from what people have told me, that if you are there when they come and you come out and talk to them, frequently they will, shall we say, it can make a difference in their actions. So it's worth the owners being there. And it will be real interesting to see if the hang tags do appear, because before, at the meeting with AEP, they said that's what they do, and people in the audience were like, not at my house. So, and they're much more careful in Athens than they are out of Athens. Right.
People really do
Well, that's
care
good
about
to know.
trees here.
Well, because they have gone onto a friend's property and they laid waste to scores of trees.
I guess maybe one thing that brought this about was a class action lawsuit in Tulsa, so that's a totally different avenue. Well, I'll make copies of this.
Please, yeah, thank you.
That would be good. Even Steve Stanley might like to see that. Yeah, he has been very good about communication, and thank the mayor for this. Is there anything else on AEP? Let's see. There is, on the landscape ordinance issues, at the moment, we really don't have an active application for any kind of landscape ordinance review for property, but Steve has been busy, Steve Pearson of the Code Enforcement Office, with sending out the letters that we requested be sent to Mr. Cornwell. This was at our last meeting, about the Carpenter Street parking lot where there are trees missing that have died, at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 such trees, and that they need to be replanted. And Steve's notified him, and here's for the minutes. And then another one that we asked to be done last time was to, let's see, get my addresses in order here. Shaw and Tatterson Point. This is the Bennigan's site where there is a serious problem with drainage, and Steve even got some really wonderful photos of the problem. It's pretty arresting image. They do have a drainage problem and have not dealt with landscaping completely either. It just gets worse and worse. So, and there are more. So, this is the best one. It has nice, great big ruts. So, they have been notified, and this is for the minutes. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome. I wanted to send those pictures to the attorney that represents Bennigan's, Mr. Rose, because in their letter it said the problem has been corrected through the employment of a Mr. Fallon. So I just, if they thought that was correct, I just wanted to see a picture of it. This is a little more extensive, too, than just violation of landscape ordinance. I have some zoning violations out there, too. This information was forwarded to the Athens City Law Director. Request for prosecution on March 18th. So I haven't seen a letter from the prosecutor's office yet, or have not talked to them, but I think probably, as I've mentioned before, whenever I do have to go to the law director's office, they like to see a lot of documentation that can be turned into evidence or facts. So, for example, here's Bennigan's with lots of pictures and letters from everyone, including the Water and Sewer Department. So I'll have to work directly with the law director now to make sure that at least something other than just this short letter from their attorney is in the record.
Thank you for the work, and the pictures of the erosion are really something. It is a drainage issue for that area.
Going back to the Carpenter Street parking lot, I don't remember, did we offer suggestions of trees that might better survive that site?
And yes, we did,
Yeah.
and
I figured
provided
we
some
did, but
suggestions.
I'll make sure. Okay.
Do you remember them at this?
Did we say oak?
I don't think we need to come up
Yeah,
again.
let's not.
No, that was
They are
done.
written.
I just wanted to make sure
Yes,
that was done.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
fine, thank you.
Yeah, it's a very difficult site, so particular species
Yeah.
were chosen.
Yes.
One of the things that stopped me from writing the letter sooner to Mr. Cornwell was there were recommendations for change, and then I had to get that list out. We provided it, and after you'd sent it to her. And so I incorporated that actually in the letter
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yes, it is in
that
there.
was sent to Mr.
Sorry.
Cornwell. So some things, could be changed, other things had to stay just the way they were.
Scrap paper.
Well, back to Bennigan's, we've seen the pictures of the drainage, which is certainly a bad problem, but did you include anything about the fact that they had not planted the trees in the parking lot, which were supposed to be planted?
Oh, yeah.
I think I did.
I think there was.
I mentioned that in my letter November 30th, mentioned it in my letter September 18th.
Cites the,
And I believe I actually even provided them with a site layout, skimpy as it was at the time, and something we'll never relive again, right, because of the new regulations.
yes, right.
Related to an applicant's necessity to to submit a plan that has all the utilities on it, proposed locations for trees and green space. I mean, it's all included in the new ordinance, so we'll never run into that problem again. But they were given a copy of what was approved.
Thank you.
And I noticed the other day, when I was out there taking the pictures, they were tearing the planters apart because everything in them had died and they'd kind of collapsed. So,
They're not having a good time. Well, I think there is no other landscape ordinance issue at this point. And I have a brief report about the trees in the park at the West State Street ball fields. There is going to be an administrative meeting. Paula Mosley, I think, is going to have a meeting on the subject of the protection of the trees in the West State Street ball fields. And yes, as we
I've
have
got your photographs here, Anne, that you sent us.
yes, those were not
With the
protected.
very large backhoe that's clearly been used to remove some trees.
Well, that was last year.
Oh,
That was
okay.
last fall, but
Oh, okay.
that's still not been rectified either.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I know,
Yeah.
didn't mean to bring it up before the meeting, sorry.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's clear that, I mean, the Service City Safety Director of the city, she is responsible for any permission to be given to something like that. I mean, that's what it says in Title 33. If you want to go removing trees from the city parks or public places, you've got to get their permission, and they do it through us, but she is the one who is designated as the person responsible for granting that permission. So it'll be interesting to hear what she's got to say about it all.
Yes, yes, and this is an area that is really suffering from administrative limbo too. This is
Because the parks.
because Parks and Recreation doesn't have a director, and so there's a kind of a
But-
black hole of communication there, I think. Well, that's about it. They are going to meet on
Are
this.
you going
and
to go to the meeting?
to the administrative? I've offered to go if they are, if it is open to the commission, yes. But I really don't know if that's going to be the case at this point. I think they've got a policy problem, that they don't really have a policy that is recognizably in place in the parks. And so we do have a basic policy about protecting
Well, there's a
trees.
city
and
ordinance
requiring- Yes,
that clearly establishes what the policy is in the city.
yes, and
Now,
it's
they
not
may not
happening
have an
over there.
administrative structure in which they can make decisions, but that clearly is the governing ordinance.
I did send you all an email tonight, and her, mostly for her benefit. I kind of boiled it down into three things. Precedent, you know, if you allow one group to do that kind of thing, how do you tell the next group that comes along and has what they think is a good idea too? But then also liability, you know, that the city really is liable for, you know, even inadvertent damage to trees. For example, the trees, they weren't cut down this time, but the roots, did you see the piles of roots around the base? There's a lot, like a bushel full on each tree. And then, of course, maintenance, long-term maintenance. Certainly those user groups, they ebb and flow, and the city will be the constant. And when there's a flood, and there's debris caught in all those fences and all that plastic, the city will be saddled with maintaining that. And so those would be three arguments, I think, that are really fair arguments for the city to make. And then, of course, the policy issues. I mean, there are policies and procedures, you know, to go about things. So hopefully we can, like, no more. We don't want any more stuff like this happening.
They need to
What
be
would the
protected.
city do if somebody came and stole the goalposts off the soccer fields or took the fencing away from round the baseball diamond? I mean, it's essentially the same thing. You're stealing city property when you're doing
We
this.
see it that way, but I found, I mean, do politicians see it that way? You know what I mean? It's like, how do we educate the decision makers or the people that maybe did it? They obviously, this was done in broad daylight. They didn't think they did anything wrong. I mean, they probably thought they were doing a favor.
Yeah,
I
and
guess.
these are the two trees that are that were most affected are the maples that are right by the, what is it, the first baseline and the third baseline of Dalton Field. Is that the?
All three of them, really.
Okay, there were.
There's three of them.
Okay, I didn't realize that. I
Yeah.
only saw two really.
It
Big.
might have gotten cleaned up. I was out there two nights ago, and I didn't have a chance to walk all the way over there, but they had a game, so I'm thinking it probably got, you know, the debris was all the old concrete was piled up against the tree and the stuff, but it probably got picked up.
Yeah.
Probably with a 2-ton truck, you know, right on a rainy day, compacting more roots. But
Could put it under the tree to keep the sun off of it. So
maybe
it
they
wasn't
thought
hot.
maybe they were holding the tree down, with.
So I missed this. Were these trees removed? Is that what happened?
Yeah, they're
Construction.
damaged.
So they were damaged. Okay.
Very bad.
There's a history, I think, of certain user groups in the parks kind of just doing things, and some trees have been removed and damaged over. I mean, there were those pin oaks that were damaged last year as well when they did put the memorials up, and so I made a list for Paula as well, because she wasn't safety service director then, and she probably isn't aware of that, but just reinforces that we need to kind of make sure all the departments, just like we have to follow the water department's policies and procedures, there's got to be some reciprocation, I think.
So how much of this do you think is because people just don't realize that trees are vulnerable? They think about trees as being like sturdy oaks, and you can't sort of damage them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's, I think, a bit of a mentality there.
I don't care what.
Yeah.
I mean, they should,
No.
I mean, their motives aren't relevant in Title 33.
No,
It simply
no,
says
I-
"Thou shalt not."
No, I agree, but I think if it's a lack of understanding, then there's education has something.
Yes, I think more education would help. It's not going to be the final
No,
solution, but I think we do need more education.
And kudos to Alvy for spending at least 2 or 3 mornings walking around the park and talking to people about trees and stuff. So you have reached out.
Yeah, and there is one of the things that I saw there before people came and joined me at the ball fields was the layout. It was a very thoughtful layout. The field that we're talking about is called Dalton Field, and I've just gotten bits and pieces of this information put together by talking to different local people. And Ralph Dalton was apparently a tremendous force for this kind of youth baseball, and he worked for the university. And I do believe that man probably was responsible for this very nice planting of big shade trees to shade bleachers for spectators in the prime spots, the first baseline and the third baseline. So in the course of, it does look like in the course of making this improvement to Dalton Field, they probably damaged trees that Ralph Dalton may have planted himself, which is a very sad thought and a mean irony in the whole thing. So this is going to be addressed by the city administration.
Just one more thing on it, Alvy. It might be, and David too, since Dave seems to have pretty good, strong feelings about it. This might be the next step. I've tried to kind of encourage email dialogue on it, but maybe the next step is for you folks to talk about what you like. How do we compensate for the community's loss?
Well, that's one thing that we need to look at for when we start the revisions of Title 33. Some cities require people to plant trees equivalent to the diameter of the tree taken away. Others require trees planted to the area, cross-sectional area. Quite a big difference, but that is one method of getting reparations out of the people who do these sorts of things. I think it's a much more effective one than going after them with the $100 a day fines that we've got at the moment, and that would be a much better penalty. And I think if we can persuade council to include something like that in the revision of that ordinance, the better.
Yeah, that would be good.
Does anybody double it? If you remove 2 inches, you've got to plant.
No. I'm saying that if you take out a 4-inch tree, you've got to plant 2 2-inch trees.
Right.
That's one possibility. But the other one is, if you take out a 4-inch tree, you'd have to plant 4 2-inch trees. So if you take out a 24-inch tree, you imagine how many trees you're going to be planting.
Right, I mean, you double it. The fine is...
Well, you
actually-
square it.
Yeah.
You don't double it, you square it.
Sometimes I hate mathematicians.
No, I know.
They're almost
They're
done.
almost
Well, hey,
very nice.
just for the record, though, Alvy, if you recall, we did have a verbal agreement, and it was from the previous Parks and Rec director, though. We compensated the loss of the 26 trees that were bulldozed and removed. And as I recall, and I was going through my emails tonight, I think we had asked for like 40 trees, and they did actually plant a few trees. I think they were some odd lot pears and water maples, but and most are dead now. But That would be something, just that maybe they'd be willing to, that would be something for Paula maybe to ask right now. I mean, it would be asking because we don't have it on ordinance, but.
Right,
you know,
replacements might be, yes.
But that's your role to
appropriate.
do. I feel like I've already said too much on this issue. I think you guys got to say.
The other thing, while we're talking about policies that the previous director made, with the soccer fields on East State Street
Yeah.
are supposed to have some trees planted, and they haven't been planted yet.
Yeah. That hasn't happened. That area flooded too, didn't it?
Oh, it floods every time it gets to 22 feet. It'll flood.
Did we take that into consideration with the recommendations
I
we
think we
made?
did.
Oh yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
bald
yeah.
cypress.
Yeah, because the sort of thing, it only floods for a day or so.
Yes.
At worst, and things like silver maples and bald cypress will probably tolerate that
Oh,
sort of
yes,
thing.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I
Well-
have just a couple things on that, if I could. I've spoken with the commissioner of baseball, and from speaking with him, my understanding is that they've planted quite a few trees, is what he's told me, and they would be willing to plant as many trees as you would recommend and wherever. They like shade too when they're waiting, if they're playing in a tournament and it's a hot day, they like to get in the shade too while you're waiting for the
I
the game
think
to end.
again, this might be the lack of leadership at the Parks Department right now because of the director leaving, but they did plant some trees, but they planted seedlings, like white pine seedlings that were just got
But again,
trampled
who gave
on
them, I guess what I'm saying is who gave them direction?
Well, we offered it.
Yeah, and then how did that get back to them? How did they
Well-
know what to plant, where, when?
They ought to be
See what I'm
reaching
saying?
out, I think, to the city. It's city don't you think? I mean, don't you think they should be directed to reach out to the city?
We did
Related
talk
to
about
that, I just,
We've tried.
related to that, a division of my office is called Lands and Buildings. George Enfelson is the director of that division. He's responsible for the maintenance of this building, all city buildings, and maintenance of grounds also, not including recreation grounds. Recreation Department has their own maintenance division. So we get a lot of calls for things that are happening with trees and shrubbery or anything at the park that has to do with lands and buildings, but it doesn't go through the code office. It's a completely
Yeah.
separate area.
So did you get calls into your office about the damage to the park trees, or?
I didn't get a call, I got copied on the same email that you did.
Oh, so
but-
you're saying you don't even need to be copied on them?
No, that's fine that I do, because I can, whenever other people might call in, then I do have information about who's responsible, who to contact, what can be done. My office is kind of like an information hub. If you don't know, you call the code office.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I did have a brief discussion with, it's Mr. Schwartzel. Is that your?
Mr. Mullins was the
Oh,
gentleman that I spoke with. Mr. Schwartzel has been, I think, one of the prime motivators in the development of those areas for sandlot baseball.
Yeah.
I think he's been in it from the start. Mr. Mullins is not.
Okay.
He's kind of new into the game.
Yeah, we spoke about the small trees that they've put in, and that in many cases that they're, well, many of them are dead now because of the drought. But they need better information, and they need serious guidance about placement of trees. They have some very good ideas, but their resources are sometimes being expended without great effect.
I think, as Ann mentioned too, the burden's on the city for, essentially for perpetual maintenance.
Yes.
So they're just kind of,
And they've
one time.
picked some things that have been maintenance issues down in the future, and so this really, something has to be done to direct that kind of activity, because it poses a maintenance issue for the city and potential hazards possibly, so it's really time to get a handle on it.
But the good news is, thanks to the tree commission, we have the information. There are established specifications for the type of tree that's appropriate for a park site and a street site, and the size of those trees. I mean, the tree commission has all of those specifications, and we use those every time you do a maintenance contract, every time you do a planting contract. So I guess it's just about getting all that information to all the department heads and making sure that people, because the information is there. It's
Including planting instructions, right? I
yeah,
mean,
planting and
soil
acceptable
types
species.
and-
Yeah.
So like, an example would be this person that was interested in planting trees. If the person had said, trees, I'm going to get a hold of the tree commission. And they got a hold of the tree commission, and they said, we want to plant some trees. We would have provided the information of the kind of trees. We would have contacted the people in the city necessary and pointed out places they could have planted them. Wouldn't that have taken care of it? So actually, if you think trees, and there's a tree commission, contact the trees commission, regardless of what it is.
Well, I agree with Mr. Ingram that I think it's just straight up, they need a permit to plant a tree on public land. It's as simple as that.
Well,
Yeah.
people have to get it. If they're going to plant a tree in their front yard that's in the right-of-way, they need a permit, so.
That's correct.
Yeah, there have been some guerrilla plantings that we actually,
Yes, there have been.
that's spelled G-U-E-R.
My image is of a gorilla planted.
Well, that happens too, you know.
That costs more, John, when we get the gorillas in.
So, okay, well, I think we,
With that dead horse.
all right, let's go headed toward bad puns otherwise. On the Emerald Ash Borer front, we have nothing really to report at this point, I think.
I
Or
do
you?
have,
You
well,
do?
nothing specific. We did meet with Ilgard, but I haven't heard anything back on that, on our project. But interesting research, some researchers in Michigan were surveying emerald ash borer, and they found a wasp, a parasitoid wasp. That's a wasp that actually, injects, and it was killing. They found it in this one forested area. It was an established population of this wasp. And since then, they've actually introduced 3 species from Asia. But that are also out in the environment up in Michigan, impacting the population of the emerald ash borer there. So it's, promising, but very
But-
early news.
But was the first one a native?
The first one, just today I got the email that they actually, it took them, they found it a month ago or maybe 2 months ago, and no one had ever identified it before, which is amazing. We're in America,
that is
and there are
amazing.
still bug species we haven't identified. But they did identify it, and it's native.
Okay.
The
So
first
a
one.
Native American wasp. Right.
Yeah. And they say there's a species for every tree. Seriously, a species of wasp for every tree.
Going back to your meeting with Ilgard, you didn't actually come away with a handful of data then?
Albie can attest.
No.
I don't know what to do next. We're totally ineffective. We admit it.
Need a bumper sticker that says "Got data." I mean,
Got
no.
That's all right. I was just curious.
We need you. Can you come to the next meeting?
Well, I've tried phone calls and so on. And I didn't
Basically,
get
they
anywhere.
don't know where it is, I assume.
No, I think they have it, and I think
It's just the inputting problem, isn't it?
But we would like to get a copy of it because we've got other things we want to do with it other than what they're going to do.
even the hard copies I wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. I'll try to work on it again this month and
Well,
see.
if you make another appointment and I'm free,
Okay, all right. Well, let's do that. Okay.
Just one more thing. Is that in the larval stage or the adult stage?
Ilgard
You
would be
know, I don't.
lost.
I'll forward you the email.
Okay, thanks.
Who else? Raise your hand if you want that email.
I do.
Okay, Emily and Lee. Okay.
Okay.
You too. You guys do. Peanut gallery.
I'm afraid of a bug.
In your
Email, yes.
email.
Email.
It's going too
Sending
long.
you an
It's only
email box.
parasitic. It's only parasitic
Wasp
emerald
with
ash.
larva stage.
Order, please. The
Sorry.
next item is the recommended street tree list revision, which is ongoing. Is there anything to report at this time, Emily or Lee?
We've done quite a bit of work on it, but we had some problems with meeting times, but I think probably one more meeting and we'll have it ready to put on a spreadsheet, which David said he would.
Oh yeah, I can do that. Yeah.
Oh, you would do that?
Yeah, I can do it.
Yeah, he
great.
offered to do that.
Wow.
It's even
Yeah,
better
because
if you-
we could even start sending you the draft lists, and because we're just still adding, right?
Yeah.
Do you want me to email those to
Yes,
you?
yeah, please. If you email me them as lists, I can then copy them over
Want me to
fairly
start
easily.
doing that?
Sure.
I'll copy you guys.
Any other? Thank you.
Is there going to be a top 10 on this group?
No, the idea is that with the aid of a spreadsheet, people will be able to create their own top 10s. So if you want a top 10 for parking lots, you'll do that, or a top 10 for parks, or whatever. I mean,
Or
that's
top
good.
10 for wet sites?
Yeah.
And then we'll let you do the top 10 all together. And we could have a quiz.
Okay, the next
But you
item.
have to have your soil tested.
The next item of business is Arbor Day, which if we were to do it according to the regular way of doing it, is the last Friday of April. So that would be Friday, April 25 or something. And in a couple of the previous years, we've chosen to do it during our planting season, which is in the fall, and to memorialize individuals at that time. So we have
Well, one reason why we moved it to the fall from April was it clashed with other things
Earth Day.
that were going on.
Yeah.
What do we know about other events going on? I mean, if they're not going to clash with it, then
should go for
should
it.
we just go for it in April?
Yeah, but there is a good, it's better to model appropriate planting times. And for deciduous trees,
Yep.
the fall is a better time to plant. It's not, it's not as good for publicity in the sense because it's not, it's spring and we're planting. But I think that,
I'm with that. Yeah.
other
That's
people
fine.
comfortable with it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
You will get a tree at Tree City USA. You'll be, awarded, you know how you get a tree every year? So if you wanted to do something, just a little PR thing with that, of course, it doesn't meet city specifications because it's small,
that's
remember?
right, that's right. But
But-
what about if we got one and put it in the library parking lot, the island that has the street light in it, is looking very bare to me. And I have a feeling they're not planning to put a tree there. Do you think if we donated a tree, they might? Do you know anything
It's a
about
cherry tree that they're that you're getting. So it'd be a small
Okay.
tree, so it wouldn't get in the
Right.
light. So that's
Uh-huh.
good.
It's a good.
We could, would you like to ask
Sure, I
Lauren
will
Miller
ask.
if she's
Okay.
interested in that?
Okay.
So we will have that little tree. We have had an Arbor Day at the library
Right, we
last
did.
year, but that's a great site for getting kids too.
And every Tuesday night, they one of my coworkers is doing an art class, so he's got 12 kids, 6 to 8, I think. So we could maybe gather them and steal them for a picture and just plant the tree real quick. I'd be happy to every Tuesday night. Do you want me to ask him?
Right.
I don't know. If you just want to take a picture and have.
You really want us to have this nice.
No, I
PR.
don't. Nice to meet you, Juan. I'm sorry.
And so that's
we
what.
don't have to have the official one, but we could do it as a, it's Arbor Day.
Yes, and you should, well, do you want to try that? You ask
I'll talk
Lauren.
to- I'll ask at the
and,
library.
And if we somehow take advantage of these children, we will contact
Lee
you.
and I, yeah, we would do it.
And then the fall will be Athens Arbor Day.
Yes.
This will be our gorilla Arbor Day.
That's right.
Right.
All right, well, that is the end of the agenda items that I have except for other, which is,
Website. What's
Website.
happening? Do we know
Not
yet?
much.
Because, we were just talking about people being able to get information from us.
Yeah.
And we've said the website is one way that we can really get information out there to people without them physically having to contact us. They can just go to that website. So I think it's important that we keep up the pressure
Pushing.
to get that done.
I would agree.
It's
It's
one
a
of-
great way to spread
yeah.
information.
So
about
then you
anything
could
we've
put
talked
in
about.
parking lot, top 10 trees.
Yeah.
And it'll give you a list.
Well, then
Actually,
you
the public
you
can
download
vote
a
on their top
spreadsheet.
10 trees on
You
our
download the
website.
spreadsheet, do it yourself.
yes. Okay, I will go press the designer and this has just been,
Because I think she had enough to get started.
yes, she did. And
Yeah.
there was the business of having the mayor's office be comfortable with the material that we were putting on it.
Yeah,
And then anything that needs to be updated goes to Ron.
yeah. I mean, I think
And we still have that problem on our website, the city's current website of listing the starting time. It says 7:30 and it should say 7. So that's a very small place to start right there. Okay. Thank you for bringing that up. Is there any other audience
participants.
Okay.
I guess I should come up to the
You should, yeah, go to the, and we do have a speaking limit of 3 minutes. We're going to prove we can.
Oh, this is,
a sham work.
I'm Greg Broadhurst, 14 Granville Avenue, and I just wanted to touch on what David had just said. If you go to the city's website, boards and commissions, and click on tree commission, it's completely dysfunctional. In fact, it goes down to where the meeting time is supposed to be, and it says the zoning board of appeals meets at Thursday at 7:30. That's what it says on the tree commission page. So there's definitely a need, and I would suggest, maybe the tree commission would get in touch with the administration, that somebody can pay attention to the needs of the community so that they can get the information, so they know what the proper times are of meetings, so that I actually went to the site because I figured it had been fixed by now, seeing how city council had all their new pictures and board and committee assignments, and the law director had his picture on the regular city website, but the rest of it is completely outdated. And in fact, it doesn't even reference the tree commission, it references the Board of Zoning Appeals. So I need some help with this, and I thought I'd let you know that's what I saw this evening, and one reason I was late, because I thought, well, maybe it's not the Board of Zoning Appeals, maybe it's the tree commission, because it says tree commission up here. But anyway, just to touch on what David, it needs a lot of work. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Greg. Is there any other item?
I had two phone calls, actually, just something for you guys to think about over the month, like you don't have enough to think about. There's been some trees have gradually declined or disappeared at West State Street Cemetery, and a longtime resident called me last week and said that she had really been thinking about, cemeteries as gardens, and really wants to, well, I think her words were she's fed up with the trees disappearing and no trees being put back, and she's willing to help, and then somebody else actually mentioned it to me as well. So I don't know if the trees have just disappeared or what, but it might be, I know it's going to be another challenging one, so something to think about.
Yeah, that also is, it sort of goes with some of the ideas I think we've got for the revision of the Title 33, and that is that if we can identify people like that as being, I don't know, tree wardens or tree helpers or something, then we can try and acknowledge people who are willing to do things like that and sort of suggest that they look after certain areas of the city, and if she's a person who wants to watch out for the trees in the cemetery, that would be a very good thing.
Okay. So what should I just tell her that I didn't, I don't know, I guess maybe we can discuss it later.
Yeah.
But we need to contact, I did drive into the cemetery to look, and it does look more bare, but I couldn't identify where things
It's,
had
again,
been taken down.
cemeteries are really great green spaces. There's not a lot of underground infrastructure, and there's no overhead wires, and they should have trees. And so that would be a place where we could really step up our planting efforts and increase canopy.
And you can get some beautiful trees established in an area like that.
Yeah, it'd be glorious to have a catalpa someplace.
Yeah.
It's like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ann. So, if there is no further business, then we are, oh, I'm sorry, we have to do the minutes. The minutes. The secretary has brought to my attention that we have not checked the minutes of the previous month. So please check your minutes that you hopefully printed off from your computer.
Yeah, the only correction I got was to the item under the ODOT Gateway grant where Anne and Alfie were to meet with Ron Lucas and be staff. I don't know whether that meeting took place or not.
No,
but
nothing happened.
Okay.
It was a very bad one.
And it's we could shoot for fall. I mean, if you guys see anybody from the city, because it's not going to be it's 100% grant. And it's not, they're going to change it to 80-20, and once they do that, it's going to be really, if we can't even do the free grant, how are we going to muster the resources to do the 80-20 match? So it's a really good program. Heck, man.
Any other corrections?
John?
One quick question. believe the city has a Wi-Fi connection in the city building here? Yes?
I found one just now, but I don't know whether it's the city's or not.
Okay. My thought was bring a computer, open it up, and during a tree commission meeting, look at the tree commission site and talk to everyone and saying, hey, this is wrong, during the time of the meeting. If there, I have a computer as a Wi-Fi connection, but there's some code or security code you need to get into it.
Not this one I found tonight, no.
You can get on the...
Yes.
You can? So you could look it up.
Yeah.
There's also scoring numbers.
Anyway, the minutes.
The minutes.
Scoring number.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I approve the minutes.
David makes the motion.
Is.
Is there a second to the motion to approve the minutes?
I seconded.
Thank you, Emily. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. The minutes are approved as submitted. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. The meeting is adjourned.
Next meeting is...
I move that this meeting be
next
adjourned.
meeting.
I'm sorry.